In recent developments, a move out of Tehran has caught the attention of policymakers in Washington and triggered reactions from leaders around the world. Iran has introduced a new strategic approach that analysts say could influence the balance of power in the Middle East and reshape the conversation surrounding regional security. What makes this moment particularly significant is not just the strategy itself, but how quickly global leaders began responding. From Europe to the Middle East and from Moscow to Beijing, governments are now carefully analyzing what this development could mean for international stability. So, what exactly has Iran done? Why are global leaders reacting so quickly? And what could this mean for the United States moving forward? In this video, we're breaking down the strategy, the reactions, and the possible consequences that could shape the geopolitical landscape in the coming months. Because when a strategic shift like this happens, the effects rarely stay confined to one country. To understand why this development is drawing so much attention, it helps to look at the broader relationship between Iran and the United States. For decades, the relationship between the two countries has been shaped by deep political disagreements, regional rivalries, and competing security interests. Both nations have pursued different visions for the future of the Middle East. The United States has maintained strong partnerships with several regional allies and has often emphasized maintaining stability through military presence and diplomatic influence. Iran, on the other hand, has focused on strengthening its regional partnerships and expanding its political and strategic influence across the Middle East. These competing priorities have created a complex environment where even small strategic decisions can attract global attention. That is why analysts around the world are carefully examining Iran's latest move. According to analysts following developments in the region, Iran's latest strategic approach appears to involve a combination of political signaling, regional coordination, and long-term positioning. Rather than relying solely on traditional diplomatic statements, Iran's leadership seems to be emphasizing a broader strategy designed to shape how other countries respond. Experts say the approach may involve strengthening relationships with regional partners, adjusting military readiness, and carefully timing political messaging. While the full scope of the strategy is still being analyzed, one thing is clear: the move has sparked immediate discussion among global policymakers. For observers in Washington, the timing and scale of the development raised important questions about Iran's broader intentions. In Washington, foreign policy experts constantly monitor developments in the Middle East. Intelligence reports, diplomatic communications, and regional security assessments all help policymakers anticipate potential changes. However, developments like this can still create moments of uncertainty. Some analysts believe Iran's latest move may have been designed to shift the strategic conversation, encouraging other countries to reconsider their assumptions about regional dynamics. For U.S. officials, the key challenge now is understanding whether the development represents a temporary tactical decision or the beginning of a longer-term strategic shift. This question is now at the center of policy discussions in Washington. Israel, one of America's closest allies in the region, is also closely watching these developments. For Israeli policymakers, Iran's strategic decisions are always treated as matters of national security. Over the years, Israel has expressed concerns about Iran's regional influence and potential military capabilities. Because of this history, any change in Iran's strategy immediately becomes the subject of intense analysis among Israeli security experts. Officials there are evaluating whether the latest development could influence regional stability or signal a broader shift in Iran's long-term objectives. At the same time, coordination between Washington and Jerusalem remains a key element in assessing how the situation evolves. Across Europe, leaders have responded with caution. Several governments have emphasized the importance of maintaining diplomatic communication and avoiding unnecessary escalation. For European policymakers, stability in the Middle East is closely tied to global energy markets, international trade routes, and broader geopolitical security. That is why European officials often encourage dialogue and diplomatic engagement whenever tensions rise. Behind the scenes, Analysts across Europe are also working to understand whether Iran's move represents a short-term signal or part of a broader geopolitical strategy. Major global powers such as Russia and China are also closely monitoring the situation. Both countries maintain diplomatic and economic relationships with Iran, while also balancing broader geopolitical interests. For Moscow and Beijing, developments involving Iran and the United States can influence global power dynamics. As a result, officials in both countries have emphasized the importance of stability and diplomatic solutions. Their responses highlight a broader reality of international politics. Developments in the Middle East rarely affect just one region. They often influence strategic calculations across the entire global system. Countries throughout the Middle East are also paying close attention. Regional governments understand that any shift in Iranian strategy could influence their own security environment. Several nations maintain strong partnerships with the United States while also keeping diplomatic channels open with Iran. This balancing act requires careful decision making whenever geopolitical tensions rise. As a result, many regional leaders are analyzing the situation closely before making significant policy changes. In a region where alliances and rivalries are deeply interconnected, even subtle strategic shifts can have far reaching consequences. As analysts examine the situation, several potential scenarios are being discussed. One possibility is that the development encourages renewed diplomatic engagement between Iran and other global powers. Another scenario involves a continuation of the current strategic standoff, where countries maintain military readiness while avoiding direct confrontation. There is also the possibility that misunderstandings or miscalculations could increase tensions if communication channels break down. However, many experts emphasize that diplomacy and strategic caution often play key roles in preventing conflicts from escalating. Ultimately, what happens next will depend on how governments interpret Iran's intentions and how they choose to respond. For now, one thing is clear. Iran's latest strategic move has sparked global discussion and forced policymakers to reevaluate the geopolitical landscape. Washington is watching closely. Regional allies are assessing the implications. And leaders around the world are carefully considering what this development could mean for international stability. But the biggest question still remains unanswered. Is this simply a strategic signal or the beginning of a larger shift in global power dynamics? The coming months may provide the answer. Until then, the world will continue watching every move, every statement, and every decision that follows. And if you want to stay informed about the developments shaping global politics, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications.